Hello, my name is John Rose, and this video is especially for those of us who've been on the hero's journey for a while, and we've been studying the obstacles on the hero's journey. We want to have a better grasp and understanding of that. This video will also be for those of us who are new to the hero's journey, and we're eager to learn how our brains have been bombarded by bullshit, which is why we're in the mess we're in today. And this has everything to do with what Dr. Herbert Shelton once said. To paraphrase Shelton, along with detoxification comes de-indoctrination. Because he knew, he'd been trying to get this message out for a long time. I always find comfort in reading many of his words because he's been through this. He knows the agony of what it's like to deal with the status quo.
This is a video I did several days ago. And I called it Hell's Angels Join the Boy Scouts. And in this video I'd like to show you some of those comfort quotes that have helped me so much over the years from Herbert Shelton. And I think it's important for all of us to understand what people like Herbert Shelton and others have gone through to put things in perspective. So I'd like to read some of those quotes. We'll start off with the very first one I have listed. Our task is a difficult one. We must not only persuade our clients to resort to measures that are unpopular and sometimes unpleasant, but we must also try to de-indoctrinate them. Detoxification must be accompanied with de-indoctrination. And that came from Fasting for Renewal of Life, pages 167 to 168. Excuse me. The next quote comes from Fasting for Renewal of Life, also on pages 306 to 307. One of my favorites. Correction is always distasteful to the truant child, says Trawl. Consequences are never to be desired, although always inevitable, when we have been the subjects of misdeeds. It is the ungrateful task of hygienists to point out to men and women what are their misdeeds. Yeah, indeed. No one wants to be told they can't do something they want to do, and they don't want to be told that they have to do something they don't want to do. I don't want to go to school, I want to go swimming. Don't tell me I can't go swimming. Don't tell me I got to go to school. And then we really get into ones that really have given me much comfort, because these are the ones I'm really talking about right here. It seldom happens that the reformer reaps the benefits of the reform he introduces. Men are slow to understand and still slower to act, but this does not deter the man or woman who possesses a genuine love of his fellow man, and whose desire for the betterment of the race is no mere sentimental pseudo-religiosity. Rather, he bravely faces the disappointments he is sure to experience, and with courage and determination advances the cause, which, as he sees it, stands for the liberation and enlightenment of his fellows. Are you guys catching what's going on here, people? He has a genuine love for his fellow man. This isn't some mere sentimental pseudo-religiosity. We're talking about how to make the world better. And he knows that there are going to be lots of disappointments. He understands that. The revolutionists must pay a price, often a big one, for the privilege, the greatest of all privileges, of awakening his fellow men to a realization of their errors and educating them to an awareness of a better and nobler life than that which they have formerly known. Men who cast aside the conventional prejudices of their age and country, and who dare to proclaim and live up to the truth which they perceive, seldom receive the esteem and respect they deserve. If they are sincere and courageous, they care not for the personal discomfort, those disappointments, which the announcement of their message brings upon them, but carve out a way for themselves. And the last two quotes are coming from The Science and Fine Art of Natural Hygiene. First one's pages 417 to 418, and then the next was on 418. Now moving down, earlier on in pages 17 to 18, few readers perhaps fully understand the difficulties that attend the effort to introduce new, radical, and revolutionary principles to the world. It is not easy for men to discard ingrained errors and lifelong prepossessions, nor to comprehend truths which conflict with the accumulated prejudices of 3,000 years. Very few individuals, once professionally educated, can ever be wholly divested of the theories of their schools. If the principles of the hygienic school are true, they overthrow all the teachings and destroy all the practices of the medical schools and render useless all of their great libraries of accumulated lore. More than this, their general acceptance will destroy a number of great commercial enterprises that are among the most profitable enterprises of the present era. Now, when I read this now, this means a lot more, or this means different things to me now that I've learned a few things. And it makes me think, well, I wonder really if Shelton really understood everything. And then, to answer that question, let's take a look at this quote that comes from Superior Nutrition on page 9. And I mentioned this in that video I started off with a little while ago. In fact, let's bring that back up and continue on where we were.
And what he said is that the biggest obstacle we have in health reform on this planet or in this country is not just ignorance, which we got a bunch of, but the main obstacle are the people in charge. It's the status quo that wants the status quo to stay the status quo.
Okay. The greatest obstacle to living reform in the earth today, the greatest foe of dietary reform, is not ignorance, of which there is much, but the desire of those who profit from the present evil practices and the means of carrying them on to continue to reap rich financial harvest from pandering to the many harmful practices of the present conventional way of life. We are in serious need of economic and agricultural revolutions. Basic changes are required before we can hope to give everyone the materials for a better and healthier life, and before we can hope to reach them with the information that they need in order to make use of those materials. So long as our channels of public information and our educational system are in the hands of the, at present, economic royalists, so long as they conceive it to be their duty to serve the special interests of these private owners of the earth, rather than to serve the interests of the people as a whole, the truth about health, disease, and healing will make slow progress in reaching the people. You see, this is why T.C. Fry changed his quarterly publication in his career from the Wellness Messenger to the Freedom Networker. He realized that the problem is we don't have an avenue for the presentation of our information. Well, the internet's changing that up a lot. But otherwise, the private owners of the earth own and control every major sector of human endeavor so they can brainwash the masses. So yes, we are ignorant, and it goes back to what Moses said in this Seeing Teachings from Enoch to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Two main obstacles: the ignorant masses and the arrogant rulers. These are the obstacles we're up against. So that's why I always try to address in every video how important it is to go upstream so we can get reconnected, but then we have to realize the difficulties in getting this message out, the obstacles on the hero's journey, the people who control the information. And we have to deal with this damage that's been done to our society, where we have all this false information, and then we have money being used as a tool to control everybody. Now, what I was thinking of up here, more than this, at first I was thinking, well, does Shelton not realize it's not about the money? It's really not about the money, folks. And this is what I'm thinking, or this is what I realize now that I didn't realize back then, because I've been studying as many pieces of the puzzle as I can to make some sense out of all this. And I now know it's not about the money. It's all about the control. Money's just the tool that's used to control us. And I'll show you in just a few more files how that's been done for a long time. So it's, again, it isn't about the money. It's all about the control. And in order for all that to happen, it has to do with health. So now let's tie that into, before I branch off into what I was just saying, how I'm going to go into those files, let's take a quick look at Voltaire. Now this came from a book by Will and Ariel Durant, The Story of Civilization, of the Age of Voltaire. This was a volume 9 of an 11-volume series. This was like a 900-page book. I was walking in the mall one day and the book just jumped off the shelf at me as I was walking by the store, and I jumped inside. Let me digress just for a moment. I'm going to come down here and show you. When I opened up the book, the very first words I read in the book, it just caught me, the first thing that caught my eye. A few doctors dared undermine their income by spreading the knowledge of preventive medicine. Now, this was at the top of the page. And then I glanced at the bottom of the page, and the next quote caught my eye. This remarkable provision of the germ theory left no mark on 18th century therapy and had to be revived a second time in the 19th century. Now, Voltaire lived from 1694 to 1778. So he lived to be 84 years old. And I'm going to digress just for a quick moment and bring up a file. And this is really a major digression, but let me just get this file out of the way, because this sort of confuses a lot of people. We think, oh my God, we're living so much longer now. Not really. This is a timeline of Greek and Roman philosophers. I created this a long time ago to illustrate how long people were living. Well, this first guy, he lived to be 90. And when we glance throughout these numbers, you're going to see a lot of people living to be 90s and 80s. Some only made it to 60, and maybe not even that, but still, you can see that we're not living any longer. The reason why we don't live as long, or why we weren't living that long 100 years ago, because we moved into cities. We hadn't figured out that we had a plumbing problem and had a lot of people dying of childhood diseases. If you made it through childhood, you lived just as long as everyone else. So we're not living that much longer because of modern medicine, but that's what they try to make us think. So now let's go back to Voltaire. Now this is on page 600. Again, those quotes I just told you about was on page 592. Let's go to this quote right here. This is what the Durant said. Voltaire was critical of medicines. Regimen is superior to medicine. And of most doctors, out of every 100 physicians, 98 are charlatans. But he added, men who are occupied in the restoration of health to other men by the joint exercise of skill and humanity are above all the great of the earth. They even partake of divinity, since to preserve and renew is almost as noble as to create. Now I'd like to stop and reflect on that thought for just a moment. We live in a sick world, folks. No one has escaped this world without being damaged somehow. So for all of those people who are out there trying their hardest to tell this message, be kind to them. They've got flaws. They're not perfect. Don't go picking at them when they're doing something as great as partaking of divinity. If they're helping people preserve and renew their health, think about this. Are they going to have flaws? You can find flaws in everybody, right? So when you look at people like Doug Graham or Lauren Lockwood or Brian Clement, these guys aren't perfect. They're going to have flaws. Are they worth mentioning? Well, let's put things in perspective. If you're out there doing the same thing, maybe. But, give these guys the respect they deserve. Again, what did Shelton say? Seldom receive the esteem and respect they deserve. These people are damaged like everyone else. They have their own flaws. But look what they're doing. They're devoting their life to helping humanity. Now let's continue on with Voltaire. This is one of my favorite quotes. Doctors are men who prescribe medicines of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less, and human beings of whom they know nothing. And then one of my all-time favorite quotes of all by Voltaire. Every man is a creature of the age in which he lives. Very few are able to rise above the ideas of the time. That's why when I say we need to rise above the ideas of the time, I'm making reference to Voltaire. Now, let's go back to where I said I'd talk about some files, and then I started digressing. The private owners of the earth. Now, what are we talking about here? Economic royalist. Remember, T.C. Fry changed his quarterly publication from the Wellness Messenger to the Freedom Networker because he realized the greatest obstacle wasn't the ignorance. They needed the knowledge, but we didn't have a way to get it out to them. There wasn't an avenue of it for to present this information. So let's see what files I have next. Let's go to this one right here. This is my file on Shaman. Now let's take a quick look right here of this article right here, The Politics of Health. Let's go back a little further. Since the time of the earliest shamans and witch doctors and healers, it became apparent that the control of health and sickness was a position of power. Now, who said that? That's Dr. Tim O'Shea, the Doctor Within website. I've made reference to him before. I really like that guy. He had it wired, didn't he? Well, now let's take a look at this. Ooh, now this is good. This is Natural Hygiene, Man's Pristine Way of Life. This is by Herbert Shelton. A New Revolutionary Situation. Actually, the so-called medicine man among the Indians was a sorcerer or shaman and practiced no healing art. See, this is how they attacked us from the very beginning, remember? Since the earliest shaman and witch doctors and healers, it was obvious that it was a control of health and sickness. See, everything in our society revolves around us being sick. The first the con artists were the shaman. They were sorcerers. They're magicians. They were sick psychopaths that are taking advantage and exploiting the sickness in man. Now, let's see here. Not by the corrupting influence of the shaman, priest, high priest, and trader. I might as well read this. Not by divine revelation, as so many have claimed for their discoveries, but by a close and careful study of nature did all these men come to their knowledge. Hygiene represents a return to that pristine mode of living that emerged with man when he first appeared on the earth. It is a revival of something precious that had been all but lost during the course of ages, thanks to the corrupting and perverting influences of shaman, priest, physician, and trader. These, with their false symptoms and false teachings, have led the race astray. When and where ignorance and superstition have prevailed with all their mind beclouding and debasing influences, their disease and crime abound. So that's Herbert Shelton. Now, where can we tie that into? Let's go to my file on magic and magicians. Is that quote in this file? You bet it is. Here it is right here. Actually, the so-called medicine man among the Indians was a sorcerer or a shaman. And again, this is Herbert Shelton, Man's Pristine Way of Life. This is my file on magic and magicians. I showed you this file a while back. I'll put a link down to this where I showed quite a few of my other files where I connect all these things together. And again, here, look at this. Let me see. The Knights Templar magic, again, sorcerer, for by sorceries were all nations deceived. That's Revelation 18:23. Sorceries, drugs, chemicals, black magic. Magic, when it's black, is harmful to us. So when you look at the word sorceries, it ties into the word pharmakeia, ties into medication, pharmacy, magic, by extension, a magician. So our pharmacists and doctors are magicians. They're giving us drugs to give the illusion that they're solving our problems because they interfere with our body's communication system. And voila, it's magic. No more symptoms. So let's move on and show you. I wanted to show the connection with the Knights Templar. And what the Templars found were the forbidden books of magic. Through this treasure, they learned the secret arts that the Illuminati was built upon. They, the Templars, see I'm color coding it red, or actually the evil is red, have used these arts to climb up the ranks of all powerful positions of our world. And they have done so by worshiping Satan. They have willingly sold their souls, and through the occult rituals, pledges, and contracts of secrecy, this knowledge is kept hidden. Their knowledge is never written, but passed through symbols, rituals, and architecture. So remember, the Knights Templar, what they did is they, before, well, I guess I might as well go to Usury. Before, it should be in there. Let me pull up my file on Usury right here. This will make sense. This is where I wanted to go. Again, this is my file on Usury. And you can see I've got a lot of related files to it. I have a best of a file preview. Charging excessive interest is called usury, blah, blah, blah. Centuries ago, usury was defined as any interest charged for a loan. Modern usage is redefined as excessive interest. That's what I was taught when I went to college over 40 years ago. Now there's no such thing. This is where we want to look into right here. This so-called clash of civilizations you're being told about by the corporate media is really a war between banking systems, with the private central bankers forcing themselves on the rest of the world, no matter how many millions must die for it. The constant hate mongering against the Muslims you see in the corporate media lies in a simple fact, like the ancient Christians prior to the Knights Templar. Muslims forbid usury, or lending the money at interest. I mentioned this in my video the other day. that the Knights Templar, again, they found the books of underneath the Temple of Solomon. They were the first bankers that we had. Remember, Christians did forbid usury, and the Muslims still do. So let me finish this sentence. Or lending money at interest, because they saw in ancient times, like Rome, how these banking practices could destroy an entire society. And that is the reason our government media insists that Muslims have to be hated and killed and converted. They refuse to submit to currencies loaned at interest. They refuse to be debt slaves. That makes them a threat to the natural order of the world, the new world order of global fascist dictatorship. Remember, 2 countries proved to the world that we live on an abundant planet. At the same time, the rest of the world was starving by design. And we attacked them and said they were the bad guys. Anybody who's ever attacked is usually against usury. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay, now let's go to another file. And moving from usury, let's go to Albert Pike. Now, who is Albert Pike? Well, he was an American general, and he was actually considered the #1 guy in the Freemason in America at the time. So this is from the history of the House of Rothschild, 1871. An American general named Albert Pike, who had been enticed into the Illuminati by this Italian guy, completes his military blueprint for 3 world wars and various revolutions through the world, culminating into moving this great conspiracy into its final stage. First World War, destroying the Tsar in Russia and attacking the religion, taking down Christianity, replacing it with communism. Second War, going after Germany. Third War, check it out, is to be played out by stirring up hatred of the Muslim world for the purposes of playing the Islamic world and the political Zionists off against one another. While this is going on, the remaining nations would be forced to fight themselves into a state of mental, physical, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. Remember, the people who rule the world are con artists. They have to distract us. Remember the MO of a psychopath. The way they attack is divide and conquer. Again, in 1871, the blueprint for 3 world wars, they knew about this for a long time. Okay, now let's move on. Again, it's all about usury, isn't it? You see the connection, Albert Pike. Now let's take a look at this book right here. This is Capital by Karl Marx. Karl Marx, since this file's all by Karl Marx, if I highlighted in magenta that we're talking about Karl Marx, he found it in his hatred of usury and moneylenders, a passionate feeling directly related to his own money difficulties. Hegel's followers were all varying degrees anti-Semitic, and in 1843, Bruno Bauer, the anti-Semitic leader of the Hegelian left, published an essay demanding that the Jews abandon Judaism completely. Marx's essays were a reply to this. He did not object to Bauer's anti-Semitism. Indeed, he shared it, endorsed it, and quoted it with approval. But he disagreed with Bauer's solution. Okay, now, let me see. What I wanted to show you in this was Martin Luther. I don't know if I have this going to the right place. Nope. It could be, actually. That's how I found this initially. Let me come back this way. Actually, I tell you what I need to do. This will be in my file preview, so let's go to the top of the file and come down. Here it is right here. This is by Martin Luther. Now this is in Karl Marx's book. So here's Martin Luther. And look at all the references. Taking the usurer, that old-fashioned but ever-renewed specimen of the capitalist for his text, Luther shows very aptly that the love of power is an element in the desire to get rich. The heathen, I'm not going to read all this. Look at all the red is usury, usurer, them, their money, usurer, the money glutton. Usury is a great huge monster, like a werewolf, who lays waste all more of any blah, 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 okay, whatever. So the usurer would deceive the world as though he were of use. Remember, these are magic books, part of the magic books that were buried under the Temple of Solomon. That's why the Knights of Templar became the very first bankers for the Christians. So, as you can see, usury, in fact, if I do a search in this file for usury, it pops up 58 times in this book. So let's go ahead and move on to the next file, Eustace Mullins, because they were talking about anti-Semites. Okay, now this is his book, The Curse of Canaan. This is the very last paragraph in the very first chapter. By this time, the reader must be thoroughly confused. The Semites are really anti-Semites, are Canaanites. They're heirs of the curse of Canaan, whose corrupt acts are dictated by the will of Canaan. The true Semites are the fair-haired warriors who built one civilization after another. And then, how do we recognize these various forces in the world today? By their deeds ye shall know them. Those who are engaged in murderous conspiracies, those whose only loyalty is to secret international organizations, those who promote the use of drugs, bizarre sexual practices, and criminal undertakings. In short, those who continue the rebellion against God, these are the Canaanites, the anti-Semites. Those who remain true to Christ are the Semites. So what they do, again, the rulers of the world, they're masters of illusion. And this ties into a book by Ishmael. And I should have pulled that file up. Let me see if I can do a quick search, or let me put in Quinn. In Daniel Quinn's book, Ishmael, what he points out is that there are takers and there are leavers in the world. And what happened, Daniel Quinn, the takers. All righty, teacher, you're a captive. I don't. Should have looked at this before I pulled it up. I know I was going to go here. About 2,000 years ago, the takers adopted as their own story that originated among leavers among centuries before. The takers came to adopt as their own story an enemy once told to denounce them, the one told by the Semites to their children about the fall of Adam and the slaughter of Abel by his brother Cain. See, this is page 154, 175, the 239. The premise of the taker story is the world belongs to man. The premise of the leaver story is man belongs to the world. Now, this guy, Daniel Quinn, said it's the story of our agricultural revolution as told by some of the earliest victims of that revolution. He knew that was a mistake, but he didn't know it was the third mistake. We made two prior mistakes. When we had the agricultural revolution, when we started eating plants that were not biologically adapted to eat, we already had two mistakes under our belt. And the first mistake is the fall of mankind. So, again, what you have to understand is that the rulers of the world are con artists. They're going to confuse us. They're going to say, don't call us, you're an anti-Semite, you're attacking us. No, you're not a Semite. You're the problem. You're the reason why we have problems. Now, this is a great book. I highly encourage it. Eustace Mullins, The Curse of Canaan. Here are some other books by Eustace Mullins. I have in my file The Rape of Justice, Americans Tribunals Exposed, The Secret History of the Atomic Bomb, The Secret Holocaust, the PDF file of it. Ezra Pound. Now, he was one of the proteges of Ezra Pound. Two of his other proteges won Nobel Prizes. They didn't give it to Eustace Mullins. In fact, they actually fired Eustace Mullins, the only man ever to be fired from the staff of the Library of Congress for political reasons, by a senator who was the president of the Anti-Defamation League. Remember, they formed the Anti-Defamation League the same year they established the Federal Reserve, the Income Tax Amendment, and the FBI. Can't talk bad about the Jews. Remember what Voltaire said. To learn who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. So, and then remember, it isn't the Jews, it's the Satanists. They just are hiding within. It's just like as if the Hell's Angels joined the Boy Scouts. Look at the Boy Scouts are doing. It's not the Boy Scouts, it's the Hell's Angels. It's the Satanists. Not all Jews are Zionists, and not all Zionists are Jews. We have to realize Satanists are Satanists are Satanists, and they have to become invisible, so they always distract us. They have to keep us at war with everyone. Now, this is the preface to his book. And I read it to you the other day, but I'll read it to you again. After 40 years of patient study of the crises which fade humanity, I arrived at a very simple conclusion. All conspiracies are satanic. Hang on a second. It's getting light over here, and light is creeping in. My curtain behind me is making a reflection on there. Go back. All conspiracies, that didn't work, are satanic. In retrospect, this conclusion should surprise no one. I admit that it came as something of a surprise to me. I had never anticipated that my decades of work would lead to such an all-encompassing and unchallengeable solution. This answer had eluded me through the years, not because I was on the wrong track, but because I had not yet consulted the ultimate source of knowledge, the Bible. To trace the machinations of the materialist conspiracy, I had deliberately limited myself to materialist sources, reference material on banking policies, banking, politics, economics, and the biographies of those who were most deeply involved in these affairs. Remember, Eustace Mullins had access to the biggest library in the world. He also wrote the book Murder by Injection, and let me read that preference.